Christine Benz's book, How to Retire, 20 Lessons for a Successful Transition. Lots of ground to cover here.
Absolutely. We've got excerpts covering, well, pretty much everything, the money side, sure, but also the emotional and social aspects that people maybe don't think about enough.
And we know what you, our listener, are looking for. You want the insights, you want them clear, engaging, and maybe even those aha moments, right? Without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission today is to pull out those actionable nuggets from Benz's work, helping you navigate this whole retirement thing.
Okay, let's dive right in. Where should we start?
Well, let's maybe kick things off with how retirement itself has, fundamentally changed. Benz really points to the rise of the 401k.
Yeah.
That's been a massive shift.
Oh, definitely. And Benz uses this great analogy from Jason Zwei, the Wall Street Journal columnist. He talks about the old pension system.
Right, the bus analogy. Yeah.
Everyone gets on the same bus, it drives to the retirement station, everyone gets off. Simple.
But now, with 401k, Zweig says it's like everyone gets their own car keys. Suddenly, you're the driver, you need the map, you got to fix the flat tires. It's a lot more individual responsibility.
Which is great, in some ways more control, but also, way more confusing if you don't really know what you're doing.
Exactly. And that brings us nicely to the next point. Retirement is way more than just the dollars and cents.
Benz and the experts she talks to really hammer home the non-financial side.
Totally. Like Fritz Gilbert's point, once you figure out the when and how financially, he said spend a whole year just focusing on the emotional and mental prep.
A whole year, wow.
Yeah, because it's not just like flipping a switch. It's a huge life change.
That makes sense. I mean, work gives us so much more than a paycheck, right? Laura Karstensen from Stanford talks about this.
Purpose, structure, seeing people every day, even just moving around more.
Yeah, the social side.
Exactly. So Karstensen argues that deciding when to stop working, even if you can afford to, should really be about those things too. Do you still get value from work beyond the money?
And if that full stop feels kind of scary, Jamie Hopkins mentions phased retirement.
Oh yeah, that's a great concept, sort of easing out gradually, cutting back hours, maybe longer vacations.
Like tapping the brakes instead of slamming them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It lets you adjust.
Okay, so preparing mentally is key. And speaking of Karstensen, she had some fascinating things to say about longevity and relationships, didn't she?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest takeaways is that how long we live is mostly about lifestyle, like 70%. Genetics is only about 30%.
70%, that's huge.
It is. And within that lifestyle piece, strong relationships are incredibly important. More important than wealth, even, for life satisfaction and longevity.
We focus so much on the money, but maybe not enough on the people.
Right. And she notes that while our social circles might get a bit smaller as we age, the connections often get deeper, more meaningful.
Quality over quantity.
Sort of. She actually mentions this kind of magic number for your close inner circle, like 3 to 4 people.
3 to 4. Why that specific range?
Well, fewer than that, and you might be more vulnerable if, you lose someone close.
Right.
It provides a bit of a buffer.
Okay.
And to get this, a surprising finding she mentioned. When men lose their wives, they often end up remarrying good friends of their late wives.
Really? Friends of the wife?
Yeah, people already in their social network. Isn't that interesting?
Wow, that is unexpected. What about marriage itself? Does it affect longevity?
It does, but it's different for men and women, according to her research.
Okay.
For men, marriage seems to boost longevity, kind of regardless of how happy the marriage is.
Curiously, just being married helps.
Apparently so, on average. But for women, it's different. For women to get that longevity boost, the marriage really needs to be high quality. Bad relationship stress seems to hit women harder.
Huh. Interesting dynamic. What about introverts? Are we doomed if we like our alone time?
No, not at all. Karstensen is really clear on this. Introversion isn't isolation. Introverts just recharge differently than extroverts.
Right, energy from solitude versus groups.
Exactly. As long as introverts have those few deep connections, they're fine. And a really key point she makes is that feeling needed by others, that's fundamental for everyone, introvert or extrovert.
Feeling needed. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so relationships are vital. Let's shift gears a bit to something maybe more tangible. Social security. Christine Benz brought in Mary Beth Franklin for this.
And Franklin really stresses how critical Social Security is now, especially with pensions becoming so much rarer. It's guaranteed income for life, and it adjusts for inflation. That's huge.
It really is irreplaceable in that sense. Now, the big question is always when to claim. Early versus waiting. What are the trade-offs?
Well, you can start as early as 62, but your monthly check is permanently reduced.
Permanently, okay.
Yeah. If you wait until your full retirement age, which varies, depends when you were born, you get your standard amount. But the real kicker is delaying past that.
Right, up to age 70.
Exactly. For every year you wait past your full retirement age, your benefit increases by about 8%. That adds up significantly.
8% a year? That sounds like a no-brainer to wait then.
Well, not necessarily. Franklin points out something interesting about the total lifetime payout.
Oh.
If you live an average lifespan, the total amount you get is often actuarially similar, whether you start early or late. Smaller checks for longer or bigger checks for shorter. It kind of balances out over an average life.
Huh. So waiting isn't always the way to get the most total dollars.
Not guaranteed, no. It depends how long you live, obviously.
Yeah.
But this is why strategies for couples get interesting. Franklin talks about the split strategy.
Okay, what's that?
For married couples, often the higher earner delays until 70. That maximizes their own benefit and the potential survivor benefit for their spouse.
Ah, the survivor benefit. Good point.
Meanwhile, the lower earning spouse might claim their benefit earlier, maybe at full retirement age, to get some income flowing into the household sooner.
That makes sense. What happens with that survivor benefit when one spouse passes away?
Well, the surviving spouse gets the higher of the two benefits, their own or their deceased spouses. They don't get both.
Oh, so household income usually drops.
Exactly. It's something important to plan for.
What if both spouses earn similar high amounts? Does delaying still make sense for both?
Maybe not as much. If both delay, sure, the household income is higher while both are alive, but the survivor benefit might not increase much because the surviving spouse's own benefit is already high.
So it gets more complex.
Yeah, that's where, personalized advice can really help weigh the options, consider health, other assets.
One last thing on Social Security. Can you change your mind if you start taking it? Like, undo it?
There are very limited options. Once you hit full retirement age, you can suspend your benefits. They'll stop paying you, but the benefit amount will start growing again up to age 70.
Okay, so you can pause it and let it grow later.
Right, but if you're on Medicare, you still have to pay those premiums yourself while your benefit is suspended. So, something to consider.
Got it. Okay, Social Security is definitely tricky. Let's move on to spending in retirement and withdrawal strategies. Jonathan Guyton's name comes up here.
Yes. Guyton really pushes back against relying on simple rules of thumb, like that old 80% of pre-retirement income idea.
Right, everyone quotes that number.
He says you need a real spending plan based on your actual spending.
Yeah.
Got to track it, differentiate essentials from discretionary stuff.
Yeah.
He even talks about having a specific travel pot, recognizing some things fluctuate.
That makes sense. Especially early retirement, people often want to travel more then, right? That fits with the retirement spending smile idea.
Exactly. Both Guyton and David Blanchett talk about this. Spending is often higher right after retiring. Travel, hobbies, enjoying freedom. Then it might dip in the middle years.
And then it potentially ticks back up later.
Yeah, often due to healthcare costs rising in later life. So it's not just a straight line down. Understanding that smile helps plan your income needs over time.
And Guyton is big on flexible withdrawal strategies, not just sticking rigidly to something like the 4% rule.
Very much so.
Yeah.
His argument is that static rules ignore how your portfolio is actually doing. Markets go up, markets go down.
Right.
Flexible systems let you adjust, maybe take out a bit more after a good year, or tighten the belt a little after a bad one. He calls it using guardrails.
Guardrails, like boundaries.
Yeah, you vary your spending with performance, but within preset upper and lower limits so you don't go off track.
Yeah.
He says static rules force you to be overly conservative, while flexibility might let you spend more over your lifetime safely.
That's a powerful idea, more dynamic.
He also warns against just living off dividends. That can mess up your portfolio allocation and might not give you enough income anyway.
Okay. What about bridging the gap if you delay Social Security? How should you invest that money?
Guyton suggests being pretty conservative with the funds you'll need, specifically for those years before Social Security kicks in. Treat it like a short-term need. Don't expose it to big market risks.
Keep it safe. Makes sense. Now, amidst all this planning and strategy, Ramit Sethi brings a different perspective, more about the psychology of spending.
Yeah, I love his approach. It's about giving yourself permission to spend on what actually matters to you.
Permission, I like that.
Define your rich life. What brings you joy? Is it travel, hobbies, helping family? Then prioritize spending there and cut back ruthlessly on things you don't care about.
And don't feel guilty about spending on the good stuff.
Exactly. No guilt. Enjoy your retirement. He also notes that things like annuities can offer real psychological comfort, that feeling of a guaranteed paycheck.
Okay, so align spending with values. Good advice. Let's shift to asset allocation, how to actually invest that retirement nest egg. William Bernstein and J.L. Collins offer thoughts here.
Bernstein starts with 4 key questions to ask yourself before you tinker with your investments and retirement.
4 questions. What are they?
1, what's your burn rate? How much are you spending? 2, how much risk can you stomach? Really? 3, do you understand financial history, market cycles? And 4, how much do you trust the financial industry?
Those are fundamental. It gets you thinking about your own situation.
Definitely. He also talks about Tippee's Treasury inflation-protected securities.
Right, for inflation protection, how does he view them?
As pretty essential, actually. The main bond type that truly guards against rising costs long-term. But he admits their yields aren't always great.
So what's the strategy?
For individuals, maybe build a ladder of individual Tippees maturing at different times, or use a mix of short and long-term TPS funds. He's much less keen on regular annuities that don't adjust for inflation.
Because inflation eats away at them.
Exactly. Plus, there's credit risk with the insurance company. He often says delaying Social Security is the best inflation-adjusted annuity most people can get.
Good point. What about stocks? They're volatile. Scary for retirees sometimes.
Bernstein acknowledges that short-term volatility, what he calls shallow risk. But he stresses that stocks are vital for long-term growth to beat inflation, which is the deep risk, the risk of running out of money over decades.
Shallow versus deep risk. I like that framing.
Yeah, he's also pretty skeptical of complex advice or people claiming they can predict markets. He favors a sensible, diversified portfolio you can stick with, not chasing perfection.
And J.L. Collins, he's known for keeping things super simple, right?
Incredibly simple.
Yeah.
His core idea is basically invest mostly in a total stock market index fund. Add some safe stuff like bonds or cash, depending on your needs, and risk tolerance. That's pretty much it.
Wow. Minimalist investing.
Totally. Live below your means, avoid debt, let compounding work its magic. He even points out that sometimes very wealthy people still worry, showing how much psychology plays into feeling financially secure.
So both seem to lean towards simplicity and staying the course. Now, Christine Benz herself offers a practical way to organize this. The bucket approach.
Yes, the bucket strategy is great for visualizing cash flow. You divide your money based on when you'll need it.
How does that work?
Bucket 1 holds cash and very short-term stuff for, say, the next year or 2 of expenses. Bucket 2 has intermediate-term bonds for maybe years 3 to 10. And bucket 3 is your long-term growth engine stocks for needs further out.
So if the market tanks.
You draw from bucket 1, which is safe, and give your stocks in bucket 3 time to recover. It provides peace of mind.
That sounds very intuitive. Okay, let's talk housing, a huge piece of the puzzle. Mark Miller has insights here.
Miller's main point is that retirees often think too short-term about housing. They focus on now, not on what they might need later as they age.
Like accessibility issues.
Exactly. Single-floor living, no stairs, wider doors, low maintenance. He says you need to think about affordability long-term, upkeep costs, and is the space efficient?
What about relocating? Lots of people consider moving in retirement.
Key factors Miller mentions are proximity to amenities, good health care, family and friends. And yes, taxes matter. States with no income tax or Social Security exemptions are attractive. But
don't let taxes be the only reason.
right, look at the whole picture. Property taxes, sales tax, cost of living.
Does owning a home still make sense in retirement versus renting?
Miller thinks so, generally. It offers protection against rising rents, especially if your mortgage is paid off. Plus, home equity is often a big asset.
A potential safety net.
Yeah, a hedge against outliving your savings. But it's illiquid, hard to tap easily, and has emotional ties. He mentions reverse mortgages, but notes they're complex and not super popular.
What about things like CCRC's continuing care retirement communities?
Miller sees them as a hybrid housing plus healthcare, but they can be very expensive and financially complicated. The big takeaway is, realistically assess how much help you might eventually need to stay in your home.
Lots to consider beyond just liking the neighborhood. Okay, how do we actually feel in control of all this? Maria Bruno and Jamie Hopkins talk about taking charge.
Bruno really emphasizes focusing on what you can control.
Which is?
Your lifestyle choices, your financial planning efforts, your discipline with saving and investing. Tune out the market noise, accept uncertainty like life expectancy, but have a solid plan.
And Hopkins suggests envisioning your ideal retirement.
Yeah, like what does your perfect day or week look like? That helps define your goals. Then you got to run the numbers, make sure it's feasible, make trade-offs if needed.
Discipline seems key again, sticking to the plan.
Crucial. Bruno stresses avoiding impulsive reactions to market swings. Hopkins talks about adjustment-based spending, being flexible about where you pull money from, maybe based on taxes that year.
And thinking about legacy too.
Yeah, what does success in retirement mean to you? Define it, plan for it, and be open to it evolving.
Okay, taxes, always a fun topic. Mike Piper breaks down retirement tax planning.
Piper clarifies the three main savings buckets: traditional tax deferred, like 401ks, Roth, tax-free growth and withdrawals, and regular taxable accounts.
And he stresses planning beyond just 1 year at a time.
Absolutely. Multi-year planning is key to avoid getting slammed by taxes later, especially from RMD's required minimum distributions.
Those forced withdrawals from traditional accounts.
Right. Before retirement, he generally advises maxing out retirement accounts, Roth or traditional, over taxable ones. Understand the trade-offs, tax deduction now versus tax-free later.
What about Roth conversions before RMDs start?
Piper suggests considering them strategically. Pay some tax now on converted amounts to potentially avoid higher rates later and get tax-free withdrawals. It's about optimizing over the long haul.
Because your tax rate in retirement isn't just about your bracket, right?
Exactly. Social Security taxation, Medicare surcharges based on income, it all interacts. He also mentions taxable accounts are flexible for pre-59.5 withdrawals and have that step-up basis for heirs.
And Social Security itself can be taxed.
Oh yeah, up to 85% of your benefits can be taxable, depending on your other income. It's complex how it all fits together, like how drawing down tax-deferred accounts impacts Social Security taxes.
Wow, tax planning is definitely not simple. Let's move to healthcare, another big, often scary topic. Carolyn McClanahan offers advice here.
McClanahan starts with the basics. Medicare covers a lot, but not everything. You need to think about supplemental coverage, Medigap or Medicare Advantage.
And budget for things Medicare doesn't cover well.
Yes, dental, vision, hearing aids, those can be big, unexpected costs. She also stresses having a good primary care doc, maybe even a geriatrician, to coordinate your care. And where you live matters for healthcare access.
What about planning for potential long-term care? That seems like the biggest unknown cost.
McClanahan says first, understand your own attitude towards healthcare. And crucially, healthy habits now, in your 40s and 50s, really lower your risk later.
Makes sense.
For long-term care itself, extensive in-home care can get incredibly expensive, sometimes more than a facility. You have to weigh costs, safety, caregiver burden. Making your home aging-friendly proactively helps too.
And talking to family is critical here.
Absolutely. Discuss potential caregiving roles, respite for caregivers, even compensation. And definitely discuss and document your wishes about life-extending treatments.
Those tough conversations again. Which leads us to Cameron Huddleston on communicating with loved ones generally.
Huddleston really drives home the need for open talks about everything. Finances, estate plans, healthcare directives, long-term care preferences. Don't leave your family guessing.
And identifying those key people, executor, power of attorney.
Yes, identify them, but also ask them if they're willing and able. Don't just assume. And then organize everything so they can actually find it when needed. Bank accounts, passwords, important papers.
Good practical advice. What about discussing future living arrangements?
Huddleston advises against making absolute statements like, never put me in a home. Life happens. Better to discuss the circumstances under which a facility might be acceptable or necessary.
Keep the options open, communicate preferences.
Exactly. Document healthcare wishes in advance directives. And for those without kids, it's even more crucial to identify trusted people or set up a trust with a professional trustee.
Proactive communication prevents future chaos. Okay, final piece. The actual estate plan. Jennifer Zell's insights.
Roselle lists the essential documents: will or trust, financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, living will advance directive, and beneficiary designations.
And those beneficiary designations are super important.
Critically important. They usually override your will for things like retirement accounts and insurance. Make sure they match your current wishes.
Good tip. How do you choose an executor?
Roselle says don't just default to the oldest kid. Think about who's organized, communicates well, is trustworthy, maybe lives nearby, and always name backups.
What about taxes and estate planning?
Giving to charity from pre-tax accounts is often tax smart. Taxable accounts get that step up in basis for heirs, reducing their capital gains tax. Understand federal and state estate inheritance taxes and that Secure Act 10-year rule for inherited IRAs.
And the general durable power of attorney.
Essential for managing finances if you become incapacitated. Don't forget the softer stuff too. Plans for pets, distributing personal items, memorial wishes.
It covers so much ground. Which brings us back to Benz's final lesson, woven throughout. Leave no regrets.
Exactly. It's the culmination of all this planning, financial, health, personal. Making thoughtful choices now means you're less likely to look back wishing you'd done things differently. Taking control.
So wrapping up this deep dive on Christine Benz's book, wow, it's clear that a good retirement is about so much more than just the size of your 401k.
Yeah, we've really covered a lot: the changing landscape, why relationships matter so much, untangling Social Security, smart spending, investing, housing, taxes, healthcare, communication, estate planning. Hopefully listeners got some of those aha moments and feel a bit more equipped.
Absolutely, and seeing how it all connects, right? Financial security supports the life you want. Good relationships boost well-being. Planning reduces stress.
And this is just a starting point, really. We hope this inspires you to dig deeper into the areas most relevant to your situation. Maybe research Social Security options, look into annuities, or finally have that estate planning talk with family.
Definitely. And to leave you with something to chew on, considering everything we've unpacked today, what's one non-financial aspect of your own retirement planning? Could be relationships, health, purpose that maybe deserves a bit more of your attention right now.
That's a great question to reflect on.
Thanks so much for joining us on The Deep Dive.